This is Roger Morier of the World Bank. Welcome to Day 2 of the World Reconstruction Conference here in Geneva. Today, this conference got into full swing with a full agenda of policy debates, of side events, of plenary sessions. The morning was dominated by a high-level policy panel which looked at some of the issues that were taking place here, some of the topics under discussion. Among them was the idea of coordination of aid and how to make it more efficient and more effective for those communities and those countries which have suffered from disasters. The panelists were also talking about capacity building and the ability of communities to be able to absorb that aid. The issue of transparency and accountability was also discussed at great length. How to make sure that the money that was intended was actually spent for the reasons it was sent. And also, there was a lot of talk about knowledge sharing, how countries that have experienced disasters in the past can share their experience so that other countries really can build back better. One of the people on that high-level policy panel was Sri Mulyani, Managing Director of the World Bank. I spoke to her a little earlier. Sri Mulyani, you were the Minister of Finance in the government of Indonesia in 2004 when that devastating tsunami hit your country. Looking back now, what do you think is the most important lesson that you learned in terms of recovery and reconstruction after the tsunami?
Well, the international community gave a huge support for the recovery and reconstruction. The first thing that I think lesson learned, which is very important, is how to coordinate all those attention as well as support and help, because they come from a different institution, international multilateral institution, and then bilateral support, or even NGO or private sector, and that need to be coordinated. They have their own preference, their own objective, and in a very short term, I think many countries dealing with this natural disaster, especially with the scale like tsunami and earthquake, they really have to be able to coordinate all the help. Second one, I think, is how we are going to provide with a framework that will provide confidence, because it will require blending the financing from their own resources with the international as well as private sector support. And this is not easy, because usually each of them have their own procurement system, and that need to be simplified. Third is try to actually get the right, priority of actually channeling this resource to what it's really needed. And that is the most difficult part, because they usually come with a very specific idea. Some NGO or private sector really want to have support only in education and health. Other is talk more on infrastructure. And that is something that need to be, sometimes the people has not been treated as the center of this help. So that is going to be something that need to be managed well.
But you've alluded now in your answer to the large number of organizations that get involved in recovery and reconstruction, international agencies, national government agencies, local communities as well, NGOs, private sector. And you see that here at the World Reconstruction Conference. It's a large number of people here representing a large number of organizations, and there's a certain amount of overlap between what they do. In terms of us at the World Bank, what do you think the role for the World Bank should be, the primary role?
Well, bank can really help. This is especially true for many developing countries which their capacity is quite limited. Like in Indonesia, they actually become the trustee of the multi-donor trust fund, but at the same time can provide with the knowledge and experience how to organize that. The overlapping is because, as I said earlier, they have a certain preference from the donor side what they want to use in channeling the money, but at the same time not necessarily fit with the situation on the field. And that's why coordination and elimination of this duplication is very important. In tsunami Aceh case, we actually try to introduce what you call it a transparent tracking system, and that's supported also by the bank as well as the UN system, how we can provide with the metrics about the location and the activity. So it is not going to be usually the area which is attracted by media most, is going to be the most favorite place in which everybody, all the donors want to channel their support on that area. But I think the other area which is not become the major attention is also deserves to have an equal treatment. And that's why this is what you call it, avoiding duplication is how you are going to provide with the equal treatment and also giving a convincing argument as well as result for all the donors that actually everywhere they are going to channel their support is actually have an equal benefit for the victim.
Now, we are here in Geneva at the World Reconstruction Conference. I wonder how you interpret the word reconstruction. Is it rebuilding physical infrastructure after disaster, or could it mean more than that?
Well, this is exactly my experience. The idea of reconstruction can be two very extreme alternatives. First, at that time, we are thinking that rebuild totally new city. But then you then create quite a lot of extremes, what you call reaction from both victim as well as the family, because they feel that they are alienated when you are going to totally change the city. Of course, in this case, their preference is going to be just rebuild exactly the same. But this is not going to guarantee about what you call it, the aspect of learning from this catastrophe as well as the disaster. So striking the right balance in terms of consulting with the people, because at the end they are the one who's going to live in the same place.
With the local communities.
The local community. But at the same time will provide with the new design, both in terms of the infrastructure as well as the location, that will provide them with the safety as well as ability to mitigate the risks in the future. That is not always easy, because they usually have traumatic, and those people still in a very depressed and shocked position. They cannot think about their future. They are still regretting what they lost and so on. And that's why finding the right balance between the design, the mitigation, but at the same time providing with the room for those people to feel that they own not only the result, but also the process is very important.
So in some ways you're saying that this could be an opportunity for the countries that are affected, even though they've been badly affected. This could be a chance for a new start in a different direction, perhaps.
Definitely. I think that is what's happening. Livelihood is going to be revived if you are going to have a more, what you call it, predictable process of reconstruction and recovery. And that is become even a new opportunity for many people, or the victim in this case, to actually design their new life. In this case, many of the, especially the first direct or round effect of the economic as well as the social activity from this reconstruction is related to the construction activity, whether this is on the infrastructure reconstruction, school or health, like hospital or even a residential area. The second one is actually to provide with the new social cohesion when the process is right, because the people feel that they are now getting together. They feel that they have become the same victim of this disaster. So that can become a huge opportunity to create what you call it the social trust and the social asset. I think that is going to be a very good element for the recovery and rebuilding of any society as well as the economy. And that's why I think reconstruction, if it is designed well, it will create a new life as well as a livelihood for a city or a village, or even in this case a provincial area.
Now you put the emphasis on people, the people that are affected, the people that are changing their lives as a result. We mustn't forget, I think, that it really is all about people. When you think of the people in Aceh who lost loved ones, who suffered after the tsunami, when you think of them and the rebuilding process they've gone through since then, what do you think they would like to see? What would be the most important thing from this conference that they would like to see emerge?
Well, certainly they want to see first from this conference that all the natural disaster management as well as reconstruction can be learned from many different places, that then can provide with a good lesson for any potential countries that will affected by disaster to be able to reconstruct faster, which put into account comprehensively the people's side, the economic activity, the social viability, as well as even in this case providing with the right and robust framework for the new city or rebuilding of the city, in this case in Aceh, that then provide with the new opportunity for them to go on with their life. I think Aceh is become one of the icon of what you call it natural disaster management post-tsunami, which provide with a good platform, and this valuable lesson can be shared through this kind of reconstruction conference. And many other countries in the world, I think, as we listen and listen to all these participants here, they actually want to build. Prevention is very important, and then the ability to move effectively when during the emergency, when the shock or the disaster hit, and then reconstruction, which is well planned. I think that is the three things that need to be learned from this conference, which is valuable for many places, many countries in the world.
Very good. Sri Mulyani Indrawati, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you.
This conference is being attended by many people, of course, many organizations and many groups of organizations. One of the largest groups of people here are made up of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, including those from the international level who are large and involved on a global scale, and also grassroots NGOs. I spoke with Robert Glasser, who is the Secretary General of CARE International, and I asked him, in his view, when a disaster strikes and a country moves into the phase of recovery and reconstruction, who are the most important people?
Well, the most important players, we would say, are women and girls, partly because women and girls are disproportionately affected by climate change. You look at the people who are killed in humanitarian disasters in developing countries, they're predominantly women and children. There's a place in Aceh that I visited after the tsunami in which there were no women survivors in one village as a result of the fact that women went and chased to find their kids rather than running to the hills. But also because of the disproportionate role women play in lifting their communities out of poverty and in supporting reconstruction. Women invest a far higher proportion of family income, the income they earn on their families relative to men. So women and girls.
But when you say women and girls, I assume you're talking about women and girls, the local communities. How important is it for those local communities to be involved on a larger scale, for instance?
Well, the people who are most vulnerable to climate change, to disasters, the increase in humanitarian emergencies, are the extremely poor people living in poor communities, actually predominantly in rural areas. So if we really want to design responses that are effective, we need to understand the needs of local communities. We need to understand which interventions are most appropriate technologically, and they need to play a leading role in designing those responses.
But that doesn't always occur. Why is that? What are some of the barriers for getting that local level involvement?
Well, arguably governments have a responsibility to protect their citizens. But if you look around the world, we have a range of different governments in place. Some that are accountable to civil society, others that actively suppress civil society. We also have some situations where there are failed states, where there is in effect no active government. So it is important to work with communities, local communities, in a variety of these different operating contexts. And you can't always assume there's a government to work with.
Now, we are here at the World Reconstruction Conference in Geneva. What do you think, from the point of view of CARE International, what is the most important thing that should emerge from this conference?
Well, CARE's mission is to support the most marginalized and poorest people in communities around the world. And those are the communities that are most vulnerable to the disasters we're increasingly seeing as a result of climate change. So for us, the priority is making sure those voices of those people are heard at the international level, and their views and their responses are incorporated into the international frameworks to respond to these disasters.
Okay. Robert Glasser from CARE International, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks.
One of the countries that has been repeatedly hit by disasters and has had to face recovery and reconstruction over and over is Pakistan. And that's why it has a lot of experience to share with other countries who are facing the same situation. And that's why I spoke with one of the delegates from Pakistan to this conference, a man who has extensive grassroots experience on the ground with this issue. And what was the situation that you had to face with the floods that struck your country last year?
Thank you, Roger. That was back in 2010. It's now almost 8 months, but the still problem is there. People are struggling with recovery and reconstruction needs. So it was actually unique floods in the history of Pakistan, and it is also unique in terms that in last 1 decade, during the course of 10 years, Pakistan has faced worst kind of disasters of its history, starting from earthquake 2005, and then IDP crisis back in 2009, and then followed by these floods. So I think that have impacted the lives and livelihoods of a large number of poor people, and also a country like Pakistan, which is whose economy is still developing.
So you said that Pakistan has had a number of experiences with disasters, natural disasters over the years. So Pakistan has had experience with rebuilding, reconstruction, recovery. How important do you think it is, the role of local communities in that process of recovery and reconstruction?
I think local communities have major role to play in all these efforts. And what we need is to support their capacities and most importantly their potential, because they hold a lot of potential. And it is important for the international community to look into their strategies and help them refine and strengthen those capacities.
But when you think of the reconstruction in the past, what exactly did local communities do? How did they help the reconstruction, in your view?
I think if we look at their capacities, it's not just the mere statements. We have seen their capacity when people were evacuating from their villages. 11,000 villages are affected, and 20 million people have to move. So if we calculate the number of people who have been supported by external agencies, they come to just fractions. It was all people moving on their own, using their own resources, using their own mechanism, using very local, very simple transport technologies. So I think they have a potential that needs to be supported.
Now, when the crisis strikes, when there's a disaster, often there's a surge of international aid. A lot of international agencies and bodies, NGOs, governments come with aid. Often the local community experience is not taken into consideration. Why is that, do you think?
I think this is one of the important issues that even this platform should be tackling. Because what we have seen that international agencies come with their own framework, which they have tested elsewhere in the world. But when they strike and when they will have to interact with the local culture, with the local needs, so they need a lot of adjustments. So I think this is one of the messages this conference should be giving to the outside world.
You've said also that when international agencies come and work in a disaster area, there are often other interlocutors, other people that they could be dealing with instead of traditional government. Who are the people you are thinking of? Who are these other interlocutors?
I think Pakistan has a huge undocumented and informal economy. And this is this undocumented and informal economy that has been bailing out people for so long. So I think this is the time to acknowledge these actors, and they should be included into planning, into policies, and into devising local reconstruction plans.
But when you say the informal economy, who do you mean? Who are you thinking of specifically?
These are the local traders, these are the so-called local middlemen who extend loan facilities, who extend agricultural inputs to farmers. I'm not saying that their conditions are all what people actually need. They are exploitative, but at least we should acknowledge their role. That can be improved by giving them ownership, by giving them respect and dignity, and giving them a sense of being included into something large.
It sounds as though you're saying at a time of a disaster, when the planning for the reconstruction and recovery is underway, all hands on deck, everybody should be involved from the local community.
Yes, yes, though it is very challenging. It is difficult to do, then it is very easy to say. But I think this is what we need, to give a sense of ownership to all the stakeholders. And I think when we give ownership to the stakeholders, they come up with their potential, they come up with their own resources, with their own capacities. And I think this is an opportunity.
We are here at the World Reconstruction Conference in Geneva. What do you think is the one most important thing that should emerge from this conference when it concludes?
I think these are very important platforms and very important opportunities. And one thing that this platform should be giving to the outside world, a system that is so clear, commitment that are so clear that they are understandable to all, but they are flexible enough to accommodate local realities, local needs, and local resources.
Okay, Abu Shakur Sindhu, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There are about 3,000 people attending this conference from all over the world, but a good many of the people here come from developing countries. One of them is Rhoda Peace Tumasimi. She is the Commissioner for the Rural Economy and Agriculture for the African Union Commission. When we met, I asked her one very simple question. Why had she come to Geneva to attend this conference?
This World Reconstruction Conference is very strategic for Africa, and also as a leader of the activity in the African Union, I have to be able to come and interact with the world leadership and also bring into context the issues of Africa, the issues which concern Africa, and also be able to take back what maybe I've seen and learned. But the interaction, I think, is very, very important. And I think the world is better if we know what is happening elsewhere, because we don't have to build from the empty premise. Something is already happening. Africa is in a different situation. First and foremost, Africa is really badly affected by climate change, and empirically this has been determined. Then secondly, Africa is one continent which has tended to lag a bit behind in issues of economics. So there's a lot of vulnerability, there's a lot of limitations, and there are many competing needs as far as African countries are concerned. So you find that the impact of climate change, the issues of disaster are affecting the people of Africa much more, I believe, than anywhere else. So it is extremely important that also, as we come into the global play, we need to take consideration the peculiarity of the continent of Africa.
One of the realities on the continent of Africa, of course, is drought, and countries and people that are affected by drought. So what is the connection then between a conference on reconstruction, which is often about building and repairing towns and cities and roads, but those issues aren't particularly relevant for countries that have to deal with drought?
Yes, we in Africa normally we feel that we get marginalized in some of the global issues. In fact, when you look at, for example, the climate change negotiations, you'll find that the emphasis is not necessarily focusing on issues of Africa. So when you look at the impact of climate change on the continent already, there is increasing frequent droughts. Sometimes when there's rain, then the floods are really, they take a big toll on Africa, on the coastlines. And also when you look at the droughts, for example, in the Greater Horn of Africa, it has impacted negatively on the livestock, on the livelihoods of the people. Already the Sahara and the Sahel desert line is already extending downwards. So you find that the discussions, of course, are focusing more on these huge destructions which are taking place, especially in the Asian world, but also maybe in the Western countries. Then you find that the issues of Africa are not being given attention to. But I believe with us coming forward and participating in these meetings and also being the voice for Africa, perhaps a better attention can be given to our continent. And in fact, maybe I should say that right now, food security is being impacted on negatively. Although we have been trying very hard to ensure that we improve on the food security situation on the continent, but you find that the drought is impacting negatively on it. Then you find the frequent floods also, which affects many countries on the coastlines especially. Also you find that a lot of what has been done gets damaged in the process.
Now, one of the issues that has come out of this conference here on Reconstruction, the World Reconstruction Conference, one of the issues has been about coordination and how countries that are helping countries that are affected by drought or other disaster, how to coordinate their action better. Is that a particular issue that you have to face in Africa? And on that coordination, what do you think needs to be done?
Well, coordination is extremely important, but you coordinate where there is partnership. I believe that partnership building in this process is very, very important. And of course, taking leadership, and the leadership must be undertaken by the countries affected. And then the coordination mechanism is built within that context. So coordination is extremely very, very important. what I see, what is happening, for example, in Africa for us, we have already put in place a program of action to address the issues of disaster. And many countries have already developed their action plans. And as you know, the issues of disaster cut across different sectors. So there is a need for proper coordination, even when disaster has not happened, because to prepare for it, to build the resilience, and also to respond require better coordinated action. But I believe if the partners also who come in the international community, when it comes in and works with government and the communities, civil society, there are many players. All those, and the private sector, because reconstruction requires, I think, a very big input from the private sector. And also ensuring that perhaps we bring in programs like insurance programs also require a lot of a coordinated action. Looking at the partners like the World Bank, the programs, for example, the GFDRR, which is supporting many programs in Africa and globally, all those, if they are coordinated better, I think we can make a difference in the lives of the people on the continent.
Now, this is the first World Reconstruction Conference, and it's the first time that a few thousand people have come together to talk about that issue of recovery and reconstruction after disaster. There are NGOs here, there are governments from all levels, national, local, regional. There's the private sector, there's international organizations obviously as well. I wonder, what do you think, if there was one outcome from this conference, from all these people gathered together for a few days here in Geneva, if there was one outcome that you would like to see in particular?
Commitment. Commitment and putting the people at the center of everything. I think this is what I would like to see happening. I want it as an output.
When you say putting people at the center of everything, what does that mean for you?
If you are making any intervention, whom are you focusing on? You are focusing on the people. The end result must be the people. The people must be at the center of everything.
Rhoda Peace-Tubusimi, the Commissioner for the Rural Economy and Agriculture for the African Union. Thank you.
I thank you too very much. It's a pleasure. At least I've had this opportunity, and I've had a good opportunity to interact during the time I'm here. I believe that when I go back, I'll be able also to use the experiences I've got here in my work, but also I have brought in an experience from Africa. Quite a lot is happening. So it's extremely good to meet you, and I'm happy that I've been able to interface with you.
Well, very good. I wish you good luck in your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Day 2 of the World Reconstruction Conference has now come to a close, at least officially, but the conversations here are going to go on well into the evening. As Rhoda Peace-Tubusimi said, that's what a lot of people come here to appreciate. The networking, the ability to meet others with similar stories, the chance to exchange knowledge, above all, to learn. If post-disaster reconstruction and recovery efforts are going to get better, this is where it all begins. I'm Roger Morier from the World Bank at the World Reconstruction Conference in Geneva.